A billionaire saw Maid's daughter sleeping outdoors. His next move surprised the city. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. Richard helped the little girl into his mansion, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the coldness she had felt just moments before. The grand entryway of the mansion, lit by soft golden chandeliers, felt like a world away from the harsh streets she had just left behind. She looked around, wide-eyed, at the polished marble floors and the towering walls adorned with priceless artwork. Richard could see the shock in her expression. She had never been inside a place like this. He gently guided her to a large, comfortable sofa in the living room, offering her a glass of water. As she took a small sip, he sat down beside her, not knowing exactly what to say. For a few moments, the two of them sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Richard couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt, knowing that this young girl and her mother had been invisible to him for so long. He had never once thought about the hardships they faced, the pain they endured, and now, seeing the girl up close, he couldn't ignore the reality any longer. "You're safe here," Richard finally said, breaking the silence. "You don't have to worry about anything. Not tonight, at least." The little girl looked at him, her eyes filled with confusion. She had never been told anything like that before. She had always been the one who had to take care of herself, who had to stay out of the way. But here, in this massive mansion, someone was actually offering her safety. "I don't want to be a bother," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can sleep outside again if you want. I don't mind." Richard shook his head firmly. "No, you won't be sleeping outside again. Not while I'm here." He paused, studying her face. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated, glancing down at her lap before finally speaking. "Sophie," she said quietly. Richard smiled, his eyes softening. "Sophie, I want to help. I don't know what's been going on with you and your mom, but I'm going to make sure you're okay. You won't have to live like this anymore." Sophie looked up at him, surprised by his sincerity. She wasn't used to people saying things like that to her. All her life, she had been told to keep her head down, to blend in, to never ask for anything. But now, here was this man, offering her something she had never dared to dream of: help, kindness, a chance. Richard's heart felt heavy as he looked at her. He knew he couldn't change everything overnight, but he could start by making sure Sophie and her mother were safe. He had spent so many years focused on building his empire, climbing higher and higher, never looking down to see who he was stepping over. But tonight, as he looked at Sophie, he realized just how much he had been missing. "I'll make sure you both have a home here, Sophie," Richard said, his voice firm. "You and your mom will never have to worry about being cold or hungry again. I promise you that." Sophie blinked, trying to process what he was saying. Was this real? Could it be? For a moment, she wondered if she was dreaming, but the warmth of the room and the sincerity in Richard's voice made her realize it wasn't. She was safe. She was seen. And for the first time in her life, she didn't have to be invisible. Richard stood up and walked over to a nearby table, picking up his phone. "I'm going to have someone get you both settled in. You'll have everything you need," he said, dialing a number. Sophie watched him, still trying to absorb the overwhelming kindness he was offering. She had spent so many nights wishing for something like this, but she never thought it would come. The thought of a stable life, a life where she wasn't just surviving but living, felt like a distant dream. But now, with Richard's promise, that dream was starting to come true. As Richard finished his call, he turned back to Sophie with a reassuring smile. "You're not alone anymore," he said. Sophie finally allowed herself to smile. Back, the weight on her shoulders lightening for the first time in years. She wasn't invisible anymore. She mattered. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a future worth fighting for. The next morning, Sophie woke up in a cozy guest room, far removed from the cold streets she had spent so many nights in. She stretched and blinked a few times, the warmth of the bed and the soft, fluffy blankets surrounding her making it hard to believe she wasn't dreaming. The room smelled faintly of lavender and fresh linens, a stark contrast to the musty, damp air of the park bench she had used as her bed just hours before. As Sophie sat up, She could hear the faint sound of footsteps outside the door. The door creaked open gently, and Richard entered with a tray of breakfast. His face was warm, his smile genuine as he placed the tray on the bed. "Good morning, Sophie," he said, his voice friendly but kind. Sophie looked up at him, still a little dazed by everything that had happened. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft. Richard smiled, sitting down beside her. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I want you to know that you are safe here. And I'm going to make sure that you and your mom have everything you need to start a new chapter in your lives." Sophie nodded slowly, trying to process his words. She had never experienced anything like this before. No one had ever offered her a chance like this, a chance to escape the cycle of poverty that she had known her whole life. She had always been told that this was her life, that nothing would ever change. But now, sitting in this grand house, it felt like a dream she didn't want to wake up from. "I don't know what to say," Sophie whispered, her eyes welling up with emotion. "You don't have to say anything," Richard replied, his voice soothing. "Just know that I'm here to help, and I'll make sure that you and your mom get the support you need." For the first time in her life, Sophie felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had always been the one to worry about her future, to fight for survival every single day. But now, Richard's kindness was offering her a glimpse of something more. After breakfast, Richard led Sophie to the living room, where he had arranged a meeting with a social worker. The woman, named Linda, was warm and welcoming, and she immediately made Sophie feel at ease. "I'm here to help you and your mom get settled in," Linda said kindly, offering Sophie a seat. "We'll make sure you have everything you need, whether it's education, healthcare, or just someone to talk to. You're not alone anymore." Sophie could hardly believe what she was hearing. Education? Healthcare? It had always been a dream for her, something she never thought she'd be able to afford or even have access to. But now, it was becoming a reality. As the conversation went on, Sophie realized just how much Richard's offer was changing her life. She would have a home, security, and the chance to go to school. She would have the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to build a future. For the first time, Sophie could see a path forward, a path where she was no longer invisible, no longer just a maid's daughter, but someone with potential, with a future. Richard had given her that chance. As they wrapped up their meeting, Linda turned to Richard with a smile. "You've done more than anyone could have imagined," she said. "You've given Sophie and her mom a chance to start over, and that's something they'll never forget." Richard smiled, his expression softening. "It's the least I could do," he said. As he watched Sophie, who was now looking out the window with a smile on her face, he felt a sense of fulfillment he hadn't known in years. He had helped her, not just by offering her a place to stay, but by giving her a future, something that seemed so simple, yet so powerful. Sophie turned to him, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. "You've changed my life." Richard smiled, the weight of his decision lifting off his shoulders. "You deserve it," he said simply. Sophie had never felt so seen, so cared for, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she truly had a future ahead of her. The city would never know what had happened behind the walls of this mansion, but Sophie would carry it with her forever, the kindness, the chance, and the belief that she was worth more than just surviving. She was finally living. As the days passed, Sophie began to settle into her new life. Richard kept his promise, ensuring that both she and her mother were well cared for. Sophie's mother, who had been overwhelmed with the responsibilities of working multiple jobs, was now able to take a breath. She no longer had to worry about where her daughter would sleep or whether they would have enough to eat. Richard's generosity had completely changed their lives. For the first time in years, they could focus on building a better future, not just surviving the present. Sophie, however, found herself struggling with the changes. She had never lived in a house like this before. The grand rooms, the elegant furniture, and the staff who catered to every need. It all felt like a dream. But there was one thing that Sophie hadn't anticipated, the weight of being different. She wasn't used to being treated with kindness and respect. Her entire life, she had been taught to keep her head down and remain invisible. Now, she was being seen. She was being given opportunities. And with that came the pressure to prove she was worth the chance she had been given. At school, Sophie was enrolled in classes she had never dreamed of attending. The teachers were kind, but there was an air of expectation that made her nervous. She felt out of place among the other students, who had grown up in wealthy families, with tutors, extracurricular activities, and vacations to exotic places. Sophie had never even owned a new pair of shoes. She had to remind herself that she was worthy of this new life, that she wasn't just the maid's daughter. One afternoon, after school, Sophie sat on the steps of the mansion, looking out over the sprawling grounds. She missed the simplicity of her old life, even though it had been filled with hardship. There had been a strange comfort in the struggle, in knowing what to expect each day. Now, everything was different, and it was both thrilling and terrifying. Just as Sophie was lost in her thoughts, Richard came outside, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something softer, more personal. "You've been quiet lately," he said, sitting beside her on the steps. Sophie hesitated, unsure of how to explain the jumble of emotions she was feeling. "It's just, everything is so different," she said softly. "I feel like I don't belong here." Richard looked at her with understanding in his eyes. "You belong here more than you know," he said. "This is your home now, Sophie. You've been given an opportunity, and I know you'll make the most of it." Sophie nodded, but still felt unsure. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this," she admitted. "I'm not like the other kids at school. They've had everything handed to them. I don't know if I can fit in." Richard smiled, a knowing smile that made Sophie feel understood. "You don't have to fit in, Sophie. You just have to be yourself. The right people will see that, and they'll appreciate you for who you are, not for where you came from." Sophie looked up at him, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time, she believed him. For the first time, she felt like she had a place in this world, not because of her circumstances, but because of her worth. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with emotion. Richard gave her a reassuring pat on the back. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Just remember this. You are not defined by your past. You are defined by who you choose to become." As the days turned into weeks, Sophie began to find her confidence. She excelled in school, earning the respect of her teachers and classmates. Her mother, too, found peace in knowing that she and her daughter had a future to look forward to. But the most surprising thing was how Sophie began to view Richard. He wasn't just the billionaire who had saved her from a life of hardship. He had become her mentor, her guide, the one who showed her that anything was possible. And as Sophie's future began to unfold before her, she realized that the true gift Richard had given her wasn't just a place to stay or money. It was the belief in herself that she had never had before. Sophie no longer saw herself as invisible. She saw herself as someone who mattered, someone who could make a difference in the world. And it was all thanks to one act of kindness that had changed everything. As Sophie continued to grow in her new life, something unexpected began to happen. She started to become more than just a student at the local school. She became an inspiration to those around her. Her teachers, who had once seen her as another struggling child, now saw her as someone with great potential. Her classmates, who had once ignored her or looked down on her, now respected her for her intelligence, kindness, and determination. Sophie had never imagined this would be her life. She had gone from living on the streets, invisible and desperate, to being in a place where people not only noticed her, but also believed in her. One afternoon, after a particularly long day at school, Sophie found herself standing by the window in the mansion's grand library. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city below. She felt a strange sense of peace as she gazed out. But there was something more, a deep sense of pride in how far she had come. She wasn't the same girl who had been shivering on the streets just a few weeks ago. She was strong, capable, and, for the first time in her life, she was truly happy. Richard, who had always been a quiet presence in her life, came into the room and stood beside her. "You've been quiet today," he said, his voice soft but filled with understanding. Sophie smiled at him. "I've just been thinking about everything," she replied. "It's hard to believe it's only been a few weeks since everything changed." Richard nodded. "It's amazing how quickly life can change when we least expect it," he said. "You've done the hard part, Sophie. You've proven that you are more than capable of achieving whatever you set your mind to." Sophie felt a surge of emotion in her chest. Richard's words meant more to her than she could say. He had not only given her a roof over her head and the opportunity for an education, but he had also shown her the power of believing in herself. For the first time, Sophie truly believed that she could make a difference in the world. As the days turned into weeks, Richard began to notice a change in his own life as well. Helping Sophie had opened his eyes in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had spent so many years focused on his empire, on the accumulation of wealth and success. But now he found himself thinking more about the people around him, about how he could use his resources to make a real difference in the lives of others. One day, as he and Sophie sat together in the mansion's garden, Richard turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "You've taught me something, Sophie," he said. Sophie looked at him, surprised. "What have I taught you?" she asked. Richard smiled. "You've taught me that success isn't just about money or power. It's about making a real difference in people's lives. I've spent so much of my life chasing after things that don't really matter, but now I see that true fulfillment comes from helping others." Sophie smiled, her heart swelling with pride. Richard had always been a figure of power and influence, but now she saw him in a new light, a man who had changed because of the kindness he had shown to one person. Richard's transformation was just as profound as Sophie's. Over the next few months, he began to take on more philanthropic endeavors, using his wealth and influence to help those in need. He started scholarship programs for children from disadvantaged backgrounds, including Sophie, and donated millions to causes that focused on ending homelessness and providing education. Sophie, too, was beginning to think about her future in new ways. She no longer saw herself as a helpless child, a victim of circumstance. She saw herself as someone who could make a difference, someone who could use her talents to help others. As she finished high school and received a full scholarship to a prestigious university, she couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude toward Richard. It was his belief in her that had given her the confidence to believe in herself. Without him, she might still be sleeping on the streets, invisible to the world. But now, Sophie knew that she had a future. She had the chance to build a life for herself, a life where she could give back to others, just as Richard had given to her. And as she prepared to leave for college, Richard pulled her aside and looked at her with a proud smile. "I'm so proud of you, Sophie," he said. "You've become someone extraordinary. Don't ever forget that you have the power to change the world, just like I've seen you do already." Sophie looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Richard," she said softly. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. I will never forget that." And with that, Sophie stepped into her new life, ready to take on the world, knowing that she had the strength, the support, and the belief in herself to make it happen. Years passed, and Sophie continued to flourish in ways that amazed everyone around her. She graduated with honors from university, securing a degree in environmental science, a field she had always been passionate about. With Richard's guidance, she had not only found her voice, but had also discovered her purpose in life. Sophie knew that she wanted to use her education to make a difference in the world, to give back to those who had helped her, and to create opportunities for others like herself. It wasn't long before she started working for a nonprofit organization dedicated to tackling homelessness and providing education to underprivileged children. Sophie's experience, her understanding of what it meant to struggle, and her drive to change the system made her an invaluable asset to the organization. She worked tirelessly, often going beyond her job description to help those in need, always with the hope of improving someone's life the way Richard had improved hers. At the same time, Richard had expanded his philanthropic work. He was no longer just funding scholarships or donating to causes. He had started his own foundation, dedicated to eradicating homelessness and providing education for underprivileged children across the country. Sophie had become an integral part of his team, using her knowledge and experience to help shape the foundation's outreach programs. The bond between them had only grown stronger over the years. Richard saw in Sophie not just the young girl he had once helped off the streets, but a brilliant, compassionate woman who was changing the world. Sophie, in turn, saw in Richard not just the man who had saved her life, but a mentor, a friend, and a reminder that kindness and compassion can have a ripple effect far beyond what we can see. One afternoon, as they sat together in the garden of Richard's mansion, Sophie looked at him with a thoughtful expression. "You know, when you first helped me, I never imagined that my life could turn out like this," she said softly. "I didn't think I would ever have the chance to make a difference. But now, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Richard smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "You've always had the ability to make a difference, Sophie," he said. "You just needed someone to believe in you. And now, you're the one believing in others." Sophie looked down at the grass for a moment, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never forgotten how Richard had taken a chance on her, how he had given her a life when she had felt like she had nothing left. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said quietly. "You gave me more than just a roof over my head. You gave me hope." Richard chuckled softly. "And you've given me more than you know, Sophie. Watching you become the person you are today has been one of the greatest joys of my life. You're doing things I could only dream of doing when I was your age. You're changing the world, one person at a time." Sophie smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. She had always wondered if she could ever repay Richard for what he had done for her. But now, she realized that she didn't need to. The best way she could repay him was by continuing to pay it forward, by helping others the way he had helped her. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the garden, Sophie and Richard sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts, but both knowing that their lives were forever intertwined. Sophie had gone from a homeless child to a successful woman with a purpose. And Richard had gone from a man obsessed with building an empire to a philanthropist whose true legacy would be the lives he had changed. Together, they had created something powerful, proof that one act of kindness could change the course of a life, and that life, in turn, could change the world. Sophie's impact continued to grow beyond the walls of Richard's foundation. Her work with the nonprofit had inspired others, and soon, she was being invited to speak at conferences, sharing her story and advocating for children who were experiencing the same struggles she once faced. It was strange for her at first, standing in front of large crowds, but as she spoke about the importance of education, hope, and second chances, she realized that this was the life she had always wanted. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was a leader, a voice for the voiceless. One evening, after a particularly moving speech at a charity event, Sophie found herself sitting in the back of a limousine with Richard, heading back to the mansion. "I still can't believe all of this," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "A few years ago, I was on the streets, and now I'm giving speeches, helping to lead change. It's like a dream." Richard smiled, his eyes warm as he looked at her. "You've earned everything, Sophie," he said. "You've worked hard to get to this point. But more than that, you've inspired others to believe in themselves." Sophie leaned back against the seat, thinking about the path she had walked. It hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead, but she knew she was on the right track. She had found her purpose. She had found her voice. As they pulled up to the mansion, Sophie's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Richard's phone ringing. He answered it quickly, and after a short conversation, he turned to Sophie with a serious expression. "We have a meeting tomorrow with a group of influential investors," he said. "They're interested in supporting the foundation's next big project." Sophie nodded, knowing how important this was. The foundation was planning to build a series of community centers across the country, places where children could go for tutoring, mentorship, and a safe place to learn and grow. It was a huge undertaking, but Richard's vision for it was clear, and Sophie was determined to help make it a reality. The next day, they sat in a sleek conference room with a group of investors, all dressed in sharp suits and speaking in business jargon. Sophie sat beside Richard, her heart racing, but she remained calm. She had learned so much over the years, not just from Richard, but from her own experiences. She had learned how to present her ideas with confidence, how to advocate for the people she cared about, and how to believe in her own abilities. As the meeting went on, Sophie found herself speaking up more and more, explaining the impact the foundation had already made and outlining the potential of the new project. She could feel the shift in the room as the investors began to listen more intently. By the end of the meeting, the investors were on board, agreeing to provide the funding needed to launch the first community center. Sophie felt a surge of pride as the deal was finalized. This was her work, her effort, and it was making a difference. As they left the meeting, Richard turned to her with a proud smile. "You did it," he said. "You made this happen." Sophie smiled back, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had come so far, and this was just the beginning. A few months later, the first community center opened its doors, offering children in underserved areas the opportunity to learn, grow, and dream. Sophie stood at the opening ceremony, her heart full as she looked out at the children running inside, their faces filled with excitement. It was a moment she would never forget. She had helped create this space, a place where children like her once were would now have the chance to reach for their dreams. As she stood there, surrounded by the people who had supported her, Sophie realized that she had truly found her calling. She had gone from a girl who had nothing to someone who was changing the world, one child at a time. Richard stood beside her, watching the children with a proud smile on his face. "You've come a long way," he said. Sophie smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "We've come a long way," she corrected him. Together, they had created something that would last, a legacy of hope and change that would continue to impact generations to come. Sophie's journey had come full circle. What started as a chance meeting with Richard had now grown into a movement that was impacting countless lives. The community center they had opened was thriving, and Sophie had become the face of the organization. She was no longer the girl who once slept on a cold bench in the park, but a leader in her own right, someone who inspired others to believe in themselves and their potential. But as with every journey, there were new challenges ahead. Sophie found herself constantly balancing her work with the nonprofit, her role in the community center, and her personal life. She had always been determined, but now, more than ever, she had to be strategic in how she managed her time and energy. Richard, ever the mentor, had noticed the stress building up in her. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings, he asked her to take a break and join him for a walk around the mansion's garden. Sophie agreed, appreciating the quiet moments she could spend with Richard, who had become like a father figure to her. "You're doing incredible things, Sophie," Richard said, his voice filled with admiration. "But I can see the weight you're carrying. You don't have to do it all alone." Sophie looked at him, feeling the truth of his words. "I know," she replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "But I feel like there's so much more to be done. The center is just the beginning. There are so many kids out there who need help, who need a chance like I had." Richard smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "And you will help them, Sophie. But you need to take care of yourself too. You can't pour from an empty cup." Sophie nodded, grateful for his wisdom. She had been so focused on the mission, so focused on helping others, that she had neglected her own well-being. It was time to find balance. "I'm just scared that if I step back, things will fall apart," she confessed. Richard placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Things won't fall apart. You've built something strong, something sustainable. Now, it's about building your own strength, too." Sophie felt a weight lift off her shoulders, the pressure she had been carrying for so long finally starting to ease. "I don't want to disappoint anyone," she admitted. "I feel like I have so many people counting on me." Richard gave her a kind smile. "You've already done more than most people ever will. The people who truly believe in you will support you, no matter what. Don't carry the world on your shoulders alone." As they walked through the garden, Sophie found herself thinking about Richard's words. She realized that she didn't have to save the world all at once. She had already made a difference, and the work she was doing would continue to ripple out, affecting more lives as time went on. Sophie took a deep breath, the fresh air calming her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. The path ahead was still long, and there were still many challenges to face, but Sophie now understood that she didn't have to face them all by herself. She had a team, she had support, and most importantly, she had the strength to keep going. That evening, as Sophie sat in her office reviewing plans for the next community center, she received a call from a young woman named Maria. Maria was one of the children from the first center they had opened, and Sophie remembered her well. She had been shy and reserved, unsure of herself when she first arrived. But now, she was calling to tell Sophie that she had been accepted to a prestigious college on a full scholarship. "I just wanted to thank you, Sophie," Maria said, her voice shaky with emotion. "I never thought I would have a chance to go to college. I thought I would just end up like my mom, working hard just to survive. But now, I have a future. You gave me that." Sophie's heart swelled with pride. "You did all the hard work, Maria," she replied. "You earned that scholarship. I'm so proud of you." As the call ended, Sophie leaned back in her chair, tears welling in her eyes. This was why she did it all. This was the moment that made everything worth it. She had helped someone change their life, and in doing so, she had created a ripple that would continue long into the future. Sophie knew that her work was far from over, but she also knew that she was exactly where she needed to be. She was making a difference, one person at a time. Sophie stood at the podium once more, but this time, the room was filled with faces she knew, faces that had watched her grow, that had seen her journey from a frightened, homeless girl to a confident young woman with a powerful voice. The audience was made up of donors, volunteers, and the very children who had come through the doors of the community centers she had worked so hard to establish. Today, Sophie wasn't just speaking to inspire others. She was speaking to celebrate a milestone, the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and unwavering belief. As she began her speech, her heart swelled with pride. I stand here today, not as someone who has been handed success, but as someone who has fought for every step forward. This journey wasn't easy, and it wasn't without its challenges, but it was worth every moment. She paused, looking around the room. Years ago, I didn't believe that a life like this was possible for someone like me. I didn't think I could escape the cycle of poverty and hardship. But I was wrong. Sophie's eyes found Richard, sitting in the front row, his face full of pride. He had been there from the beginning, offering guidance when she needed it most. His belief in her had been the spark that set everything in motion, and now, she was seeing the results. I've had the privilege of working with children who, just like me, once believed their dreams were out of reach. And now, thanks to all of you, those children are learning, growing, and becoming the leaders of tomorrow. Sophie's voice wavered with emotion as she spoke of the impact the community centers had made. This isn't just a project. This is a movement. We are giving children the tools they need to build a future, and in doing so, we are changing the world, one life at a time. The audience sat in rapt attention, some with tears in their eyes, as Sophie continued to share the stories of the kids who had passed through the centers and gone on to achieve great things. There was Maria, the young girl who had earned a full scholarship to college, and Jason, who had become a mentor to younger students. The stories were countless, each one a testament to the power of opportunity and to the transformative effect of believing in someone when no one else would. When Sophie finished her speech, the room erupted in applause. It wasn't just a round of applause for the work that had been done. It was a standing ovation for Sophie herself, for the woman she had become, and for the difference she had made in the world. Sophie stepped down from the podium, her heart full, knowing that this was only the beginning. She had come a long way from the girl who had once slept on the cold streets, feeling invisible and forgotten. Now, she was a beacon of hope for others, a reminder that no matter where you come from, you have the power to create change. As she walked off the stage, Richard met her with open arms. "You've done it, Sophie," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You've changed the world." Sophie smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "No, Richard," she said softly. "We've changed the world." And with that, they both knew that their work wasn't done yet. There were still countless children to help, countless lives to change. But Sophie no longer felt like she was walking that path alone. She had a family, a purpose, and a future. She had come full circle, and now, she was ready to continue making a difference for the rest of her life. The foundation they had built would live on, growing and evolving, helping more children find their way, just as Sophie had found hers. And as Sophie looked out at the future, she realized that the journey was far from over. She had made it this far, and now, there was no limit to what she could accomplish. In this inspiring journey of transformation, Sophie's story stands as a testament to the power of second chances. From sleeping on the streets to becoming a leader in her community, Sophie's life echoes the incredible potential of overcoming adversity. Through the support of a millionaire who believed in her, Sophie not only changed her own life, but also impacted the lives of countless others. This is one of the most compelling millionaire stories, showcasing the extraordinary impact a single act of kindness can have. Sophie's rise from being homeless to becoming a force for good serves as a reminder of the true meaning of wealth, not measured by money, but by the lives you touch. As Sophie continued to build a future for herself and others, her work expanded into helping children in underserved communities, providing them with the same opportunities she had been given. Her journey is one of the most inspiring millionaire stories, offering proof that success is not just about personal achievements, but also about lifting others up. The foundation she helped establish and the community centers she created are now helping future generations of children break free from poverty and build their own success stories. This remarkable journey is not just a tale of one woman's transformation, but a glimpse into the true power of kindness, the ripple effect of opportunity, and the beauty of shared success. Sophie's millionaire story is one that will continue to inspire and remind us that we all have the power to change lives. With each child she helps, Sophie is adding a new chapter to the story of what it means to be truly wealthy. Her story is one of the most impactful millionaire stories that shows how success can be used to create lasting change, leaving behind a legacy of hope and opportunity for others.